All right, let's just jump right into this. Picture this for a second. You're a stick man. You're slowly sinking in quicksand, and yet you absolutely refuse to drop this massively heavy bag of coins you're holding on to. Sounds crazy, right? Well, today, in this explainer, we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating glitches in human psychology, the sunk cost fallacy. We are going to figure out exactly why our brains are quite literally hardwired to hold on to our mistakes, and, way more importantly, how the latest behavioral science says we can finally just let them go. So ask yourself, why do we hold on to our mistakes? I mean, be honest here. Have you ever sat through a truly terrible, agonizingly boring movie at the theater just because, well, you already paid $20 for the ticket? Or maybe you've held on to a losing financial investment way longer than you should have, convincing yourself it absolutely has to bounce back. Look, if you're not in your head right now, you are definitely not alone. This isn't some sort of personal weakness. It is actually a fundamental quirk of human cognition. We call it the sunk cost fallacy. Basically, it's our tendency to consistently continue down a chosen path, even when it has glaringly negative outcomes, simply because past costs have already been incurred, whether that's time, money, or effort. And here is the kicker. Those costs cannot be reversed. Logically, past costs are completely irrelevant to your future decisions. The money, it's gone. The time, also gone. And yet our brains absolutely refuse to let it go. Let's look at how this actually traps us. Part 1. The sunk cost trap. The harsh reality here is that past costs cannot be reversed, and they absolutely should not dictate your future. Now, if we were perfectly logical, emotionless computers, we'd evaluate every single decision based solely on future costs and future benefits. But, we aren't robots. We are that stick man sinking in the quicksand. We're clinging to a bag of coins that is actively pulling us under simply because we worked so hard to earn those coins in the first place. And this is a universal thing. Just think about everyday sunk costs. It's not just about high-level corporate economics. It bleeds into literally everything. Finishing that terrible movie. Holding on to a losing stock because selling it makes the loss feel real. Or what about staying in a toxic relationship or a totally dead-end job just because you've already invested 5 years into it? It even happens when you force yourself to finish a massive meal at a restaurant when you're already completely stuffed just because you paid for it. We actively choose to suffer in the present to somehow justify the past. So why do we do this to ourselves? Well, to understand the why, we really have to look under the hood of the human brain. Part 2, System 1 versus System 2. The famous psychologist Daniel Kahneman developed this brilliant dual system model for how our brains operate. Basically, our brains run on 2 different tracks. System 1 is fast, it's automatic, intuitive, and it relies heavily on mental shortcuts, or what scientists call heuristics. System 2, on the other hand, is slow, deliberate, analytical, and highly rational. Now, here's the really interesting part. We love to think that we use System 2 for all our big decisions, but behavioral science shows us that most real-world decisions actually happen in System 1. And System 1 is heavily biased, making decisions based on pre-existing memories and quick shortcuts rather than purely neutral logic. Which leads us directly to this concept of bounded rationality. You see, relying on System 1 isn't actually a defect. It's a biological necessity. Our decision-making is naturally limited. We almost never have complete information. We obviously can't predict the future. And frankly, our brains just don't have the processing capacity to painstakingly analyze every single choice using System 2. So we use mental shortcuts to save energy and, well, survive in a complex world. The trade-off for that? Cognitive biases and systematic errors become an inevitable part of normal human cognition. We are literally wired to make these mistakes. And it gets worse, because the sunk cost fallacy rarely works alone. Part 3. The escalation of commitments. Cognitive biases basically act like a team. When you're caught in a sunk cost trap, these multipliers lock you in. First up is irrational escalation. This is where we actually double down on a bad decision just to stay consistent with our past choices. Then, the status quo bias kicks in. Humans are deeply, deeply averse to change and uncertainty. We prefer things to stay exactly the same, even if the same is terrible. And then there's my personal favorite, effort justification, also known in the research as the IKEA effect. We place a disproportionately high value on an object simply because we put physical or mental effort into it. Think about it. You will fiercely defend a really wobbly, terribly built coffee table in your living room just because you spent 3 agonizing hours assembling it yourself. And wrapping all of this together is the heaviest anchor of them all, loss aversion. This is the psychological phenomenon where the pain of losing something is actually significantly greater than the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing. We are naturally, biologically far more afraid of losing than we are motivated to win. Accepting a sunk cost means admitting a loss, and our brains will do pretty much anything to avoid feeling that specific pain. The data here is just wild. In behavioral economics, studies consistently show that the emotional impact of a loss is roughly twice as powerful as the impact of an equivalent gain. That is a 67 to 33 ratio of pain to pleasure. Think of it this way. If you find $20 on the street, hey, you're pretty happy. But if you lose $20 out of your wallet, you are absolutely furious. That outsized, disproportionate pain is exactly why we hold on to losing stocks, bad jobs, and terrible movies. We just cannot stomach the feeling of the loss becoming final. Okay, so our brains are clearly rigged against us. What do we actually do about it?
Part 4, breaking the cycle.
So since System 1 is fast and unconscious, just trying to use sheer willpower to stop being biased, yeah, that simply won't work. We need better tools. Researchers call these cognitive forcing strategies. These are specific mental tools designed to, quite literally, force your brain out of that automatic System 1 autopilot and into deliberate System 2 thinking. It's basically a 4-step process. 1, you have to humble yourself and acknowledge the limits of your own reasoning. 2, seek an outside perspective from someone who isn't emotionally invested in your sunk costs. 3, actively build daily habits of self-critique. And 4, deploy specific strategies to circumvent those errors. Let's actually look at a couple of those specific strategies right now. The first solution is beautifully simple. It's called the consider the opposite technique. When you find yourself on the fence about continuing an investment, a project, or even a relationship, force yourself to actively argue why your initial judgment might be completely 100% wrong. Literally write down all the reasons why walking away right now is actually the smartest thing you could possibly do. By forcing your brain to play devil's advocate, you disrupt the confirmation bias that's actively keeping you stuck. Another incredibly powerful tool, especially in the business world, is the pre-mortem. Before you even start a new project or make a big investment, you gather your team and you vividly imagine a future where the project has completely and utterly failed. It's a disaster. Then you work backward to identify everything that went wrong. Doing this gives everyone total permission to voice their doubts, and it surfaces potential sunk costs before you've even spent a single dime. It totally shatters the optimism bias before it can even take root. Finally, sometimes you just can't change your brain, so you have to change your environment instead. This is known as choice architecture, or nudging. It's all about structuring your environment so that the default choice is automatically the rational one. There's this famous example from behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Shlomo Bernardzi called the Save More Tomorrow plan. They knew people suffer from loss aversion and absolutely hate seeing their current paycheck shrink to fund their retirement. So they designed a system where employees commit right now to allocate a portion of future pay raises to their savings. Because the money comes out of a future raise, their current take-home pay never drops. They feel zero loss, totally bypassing loss aversion. We can do this in our own lives too. Design checklists, set optimal defaults, and build environments that literally protect us from ourselves. At the end of the day, you are not your past decisions. Think back to our stick man in the quicksand. Accepting a small loss today hurts. There is absolutely no denying that. But holding on to that heavy bag of coins is only going to drag you under. Recognizing the sunk cost fallacy allows you to take the hit, drop the weight, and survive so you can make a much smarter decision tomorrow. So I want to leave you with a provocative question. What is one sunk cost you are holding on to right now? Is it a project, a pricey subscription, a bad investment, or maybe even a relationship? I really want you to think about what you could gain if you finally just let it go. Let me know in the comments below. I'd absolutely love to read your thoughts. And hey, if this explainer helped you see things a little more clearly, make sure to share it with someone who might be carrying a heavy bag of coins themselves. Until next time, keep questioning your assumptions.